All right, welcome to 22nd Annual Central Southwest Asian Studies Conference. And there were a couple of questions. First and foremost, I welcome everyone. And there were questions about what we are doing for the classes. One page typed based on your jot down notes that you are making today. You bring in a week from today, so you have a coming weekend to work on your project, and that is due Tuesday, April 8th. So what we are doing today is that I have about 70 slides, but I think I'm going to go through a few of them for the next 10 minutes, and then we're going to have four wonderful, impressive presentations that you're going to be hearing and watching. And so let's start talking about centrality of Inner Eurasia as you see it on the board. Now, Inner Eurasia is a kind of a term that has been used lately by some of the US scholars, European scholars, instead of Central Asia. So Central Asia, synonym with Inner Eurasia we are dealing with. First and foremost, I gotta thank a few people that you might not know, but then President George Dennison, that we started with him 27, 28 years ago. He was there all the time, traveled with us actually on the Silk Road to a number of different countries. And then President Royce Engstrom also traveled with us. Will never ever finish their support when we are dealing with President Seth Bartner that has been to a number of our conferences. We never ever forget their support for this program. That if you Google Central Southwest Asia primarily, you will notice that it says University of Montana. It's the only one, the number one in the country. This unit that we are talking about primarily has not had any sabbatical, has raised $6 or $7 million for we started with a course, we expanded it into a minor and then a major and then a center and then money for traveling students, traveling faculty. Now, remembering some of our best friends and colleagues that we lost last 2-3 years, Professor Robert Green, the chair of the history department, Professor Don Baduno from forestry and preservation, Professor Linda Fry that has a number of 13, 14 books on European civilization and culture, and then Professor Paul Dittrich, that also the head of religious studies at University of Montana. We remember them all as people who were highly dedicated and committed to what they did, the program, and to the university and students. Then some of my mentors, like Professor Phyllis Ackerman, Professor Arthur Pope, Professor Richard Fry, we have used some of these people books, like The Heritage of Central Asia. You're pretty familiar with some of our students who have taken courses with us. And of course, Professor Frederick Starr from Johns Hopkins University, that Lost Enlightenment, one of the masterpieces that he has written on golden age of Central Asia during dark ages. That is an amazing book that he has written. Some of my publication that a couple of them are actually with a group of international scholars, including Professor Mehrdad Kia, that was the director of the center, and on the Silk Road, on various issues, ancient, medieval, modern issues of Central Asia, as you see. But the story of Central Asia, I'm going a little bit fast, so I do not see how far I go in the next 5 minutes or so. The story of Central Asia actually starts with steppe, like the green area that you see that is so cold, southern Siberia, that trees don't grow, but it is a flat land, grassland, and so many like herders actually start their life in that particular area, and migration that starts from that area, Pontic Caspian migration, North India, Middle East, Europe, and then, of course, some of these guys known as Scythian Sakas that you see here from Inner Eurasia, master of metal works, when we are talking about metal, copper, like 4th millennium, bronze, 3rd millennium, steel, 2nd millennium. But then here we are talking about 700 to 300 BC, when these guys were masters of some of these jewelry pieces, gold pieces that you are seeing. Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg actually has 20,000 of these pieces, showing the fact that these guys were actually teaching so many other people how to go about doing some of these amazing pieces of metal works. Now, a couple of these scholars who have found in the funerary site, what you see to your right-hand side is called Gold Man, with 4,000 pieces of gold woven together. That was found by scholar, the most famous scholar of Kazakhstan, Mr. Kamal Akishov, Akishov. And then the one that you see to your left-hand side primarily was found a couple of years after the fall of Soviet Union, 1993, 1994, by Natalia Polizmuk, that is in Altai Mountains. That is to the east of Russia and to the north of like Kazakhstan, northeast of Kazakhstan. And now this is the place that domestication of horse happens in 3500 BC. And this is the place that, when we are talking about the earliest pants and boots, according to these gold pieces that you see, has been found between 700 to 300 BC within the area. And when we talk about Hermitage Museum, here is Hermitage Museum that Peter the Great actually in the early 18th century was moved the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and then he built this particular museum next to the palace. Now this is the place that Chariot was actually came into existence in 2000 BC. And also when we are talking about Inner Eurasia, this is the place that the first knotted carpet actually came into existence, 600 BC we are talking about. And we are looking at Tian Shan Mountains to the east. We are talking about mountains in the top of the world when we are talking about the southern part of Central Asia, Tian Shan Mountains, Pamir, Hindu Kush, Karakoram. These are all quite a few of them have over 20,000 feet high. Now, there are a number of issues. First and foremost, we are talking about the eastern part of Central Asia that is still under occupation of Chinese when we are talking about Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Tibet. But then when we are talking about the western part of Central Asia, the northern part was taken over by Russia in the first half of 19th century. The second part of it, the southern part of it, was taken over by Russians in the second half of 19th century. This was how it looked by when Lenin actually drew a map. So when we are talking about some of the states of Central Asia, this was primarily drawn between 1924 by 1936 by Stalin, that based on no historical or cultural background, he created this, he divided this land between like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. But then just since I'm going out of things, just one major issue, celebrating non-proliferation of disarmament of Kazakhstan, 94, 97. People don't realize that Kazakhstan, one of these, the largest state, actually was the arsenal of former Soviet Union. And primarily when we are talking about Kazakhstan signing to remove nuclear weapons, closing missiles, silos, and converting biological weapon and destroying nuclear test ranges. This was negotiated during President Bush, father. When we are talking about 1991 was the fall of Soviet Union. That is President Nazarbayev that is shaking hand. President Bush was saying that, well, his hands were shaking, and then he was staring at me like he wanted to cry. And then this dismantle of the nuclear facilities was continued in 1990s at the time of President Clinton. So now we are talking about long-range missiles. That is RS-10s. We are talking about middle-range missiles, that is RS-22. And then we are talking about short-range interceptors, A-135, that there are thousands of them that they were dismantled by the like when we are talking about 1990s. And I think I'm going to stop right there and ask Anne-Marie to come and give us a wonderful presentation. Let's have a hand for Anne-Marie here.
Thank you. How do I find my... Thank you for coming. And I want to say that in his introduction and in talking about our center, the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, Dr. Kia forgot to mention two of the pillars of the department who've been here for a long time and who are probably the heart and soul of our department, Dr. Ardi Kia and Dr. Mirdad Kia. My presentation today is for a class I'm taking called Islam in the West. When we hear that phrase, we sometimes think conflict and misunderstanding, antagonism, and worse. However, there are other faces to Islam. The face of Islam doesn't have to be the Taliban or the Ayatollahs. I would like to introduce you to another face of Islam. Her name is Rifat Hassan. She's a theologian, poet, teacher, writer. And she has made it her life's mission to help the West understand Islam and to help the followers of Islam understand and communicate well with the West. Rifat Hassan was born in 1943. She's still living in Louisville, Kentucky. She also maintains a home in Pakistan. Her father was a Muslim from a very well-established Muslim family in Lahore, Pakistan. And her mother was also from an old established family. However, the families were very different. Her father's family was a family of bureaucrats. They had worked with the British while the British colonized or controlled India. And then later they worked as bureaucrats in the governments of India and Pakistan after the separation. He was a very conservative, very traditional Muslim. Her mother, on the other hand, was Muslim, but she was from a family of creative people, artists, poets, writers. She and the father differed. The father was conservative, traditional. The mother was nonconforming. They married when the mother, her name was Daisy Dalira, was 16, and the father was 32. His name was Feroz Hassan. Together they had 10 children. One died in infancy. Rifat was the 5th child and the 3rd girl. She attended school in Lahore, an Anglican mission school, where the medium of instruction was English. So she grew up fluent in several languages. The school was co-ed, and when Rifat turned 12, her father said to her mother, she has to stop attending a co-ed school now. She's going to have to go to the convent school for the rest of her education, and that's all girls. Rifat said, in speaking and writing about it, she said, in all the wisdom of a 12-year-old, I knew that if I didn't defy my father in this instance, he would control my life from now on. Her older sister had just been married at the age of 16 to an older man, rich man, uneducated. She didn't want that to happen to her. So she said to her mother, I'm not going to leave the school that I love. I want to continue going to school with my brothers. If you force me to transfer, I'm going to discontinue my education altogether. Her mother sided with her, and her father upbraided the mother seriously for letting her get away with this. But it was a pattern in the family. Mother and father were always in disagreement, particularly on their hopes for the girls. So she continued to attend school with her brothers until she was 17 years old. The stress within the family, because of the disagreement between mother and father, and they didn't try to hide it, they argued frequently. The stress bothered her quite a bit, and she would withdraw to her room. They had a very nice home. She had her own room. She would withdraw to her room and read and write poetry. So there was a lot of stress within the home, but at the same time, there was considerable chaos outside the home. And during Rafiq's early childhood, India was in the final phase of its becoming independent from England. You can see on the map where India is located in Asia, Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia. After independence, India was immediately divided in the Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan. All of the Muslims in the country were expected to go to Pakistan, and all of the Hindus were expected to move into the Dominion of India. You can see the arrows showing where these forced migrations occurred. People didn't necessarily want to move where they were told to move. The orange or gold stars indicate areas where there was a lot of interethnic conflict, massacres actually, and atrocities. Even though Gandhi emphasized nonviolence, the change was anything but nonviolent among many of the people. When Rifat graduated from secondary school, in her words, she ran away to England. She didn't feel at home in Pakistan anymore. She had a brother studying at Oxford in England, so she had family. She ran away to England. She was accepted at St. Mary's College, Durham University. She earned her undergraduate degrees in both English and philosophy. While she was studying philosophy, she attended a conference during which the speaker talked about the philosophy of religions. He spoke of the philosophy of Hinduism, the philosophy of Taoism, the philosophy of Christianity. And at the end of the lecture, Rifat asked him, well, what about the philosophy of Islam? He said to her very dismissively, Islam has no philosophy. So, as she did in many of the circumstances of her life, she took issue with that. And her response and her reaction to that particular challenge set her in a very particular path. And that was to pursue a doctorate. And she made the focus of her research a philosopher, and a Muslim philosopher named Muhammad Iqbal. He's called the spiritual father of Pakistan, and his philosophy, his study of Islam, resonated very much with her. She returned from England with her doctorate and initially taught at the University of Punjab in Lahore. Later, she had a government position in research. However, she still did not feel very much at home in Pakistan. She decided to emigrate to the United States, and when she did, she taught first at Villanova, University of Pennsylvania, Oklahoma State. Her longest tenure was at the University of Louisville, in Louisville, Kentucky. Something happened while she was at the Oklahoma. The college had associations for students, and this particular university had a Muslim Students Association. Every association had to have an advisor, a faculty advisor. Because Rifat was the only Muslim on the faculty, she was assigned advisor to the Muslim Students Association, which we might think that's a really good fit. However, the Student Association was all male, women not allowed. The men were from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. She accepted the challenge and understood that it was a challenge, too, for the men that she was assigned to lead. And because of her attitude and because of their good response, they made it work. Throughout her teaching career, Rifat taught religious studies, she taught the Quran, and she taught Islam. What she found in her study of the Quran was that man was not created before women. Humanity was created at the same time. And that within the Quran, there was very little or no basis for women being subservient to men. She also noted that in the Quran, unlike in the Bible, there is no creation story. Or the creation story that is there is very different from what we see in the Bible. In addition, there's no fall. In the Quran, humanity is given the option of choosing free will, the freedom to choose and decide. And of all the creatures, humanity was that group that said, yes, we want free will, we choose to decide. So, in a sense, as the story goes, the mistakes we make are not attributable to an Eve, a woman. It's on all of us. One thing that Rifat was very, very involved in is interreligious dialogue. She called it trialogue because she primarily interacted with people from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Very often in the groups to which she belonged, she was the only Muslim. And sometimes when there were more Muslims, she would probably be the only woman. One thing she learned in working with people from other religious backgrounds was that she knew very, very much about Christianity and Islam and Judaism. You would expect that because she taught religion. But her colleagues knew very, very little about Islam. And often what they knew was oversimplified or reductive. I know you probably can guess what the turning point was. She was in the United States, in Louisville, teaching at the university, when the destruction of the Twin Towers occurred. That was a turning point in her life, because after that, it became very painfully clear how little the West understood Islam and how very little most Muslims understood the West. So she decided that she was going to devote much of her life from then on to creating or working toward mutual understanding. Two peace-building exchange programs that she developed were Islamic life in the United States and religion and society, etc. She did this while she was at Louisville. She retired from there in 2009. So these were pretty much the last big efforts that she made before retirement in what became her lifelong mission. In these programs, she was able to bring scholars and community members and religious people from Islam and from Western religions together to dialogue and to come to know one another. She also did this on an international level. She was able to send people to Pakistan, to Afghanistan, to interact with their colleagues there. And the State Department found that the model she used was really good and hoped that other programs, other similar programs would be developed. Another of her passions was her dedication to women's empowerment. What she did was gather like-minded people and go to the villages of Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., and talk to the women and young girls directly in the villages. And she would ask them, not, are you familiar with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Because probably not. So she would ask them, do you believe in Allah? And they would say yes. They were devout women. Yes. Do you believe that Allah is compassionate? And they would say yes. And then she would say, then doesn't it follow that Allah wants you to be educated? He wants you to be safe. Allah wants you to have the same privileges as your brothers. And in that way, she began raising the consciousness of the girls and women, hoping that she could empower them to stand up for themselves, first in little ways, and then possibly in bigger ways. She was able to convince the government of Pakistan to banish honor killings. She established an international network for the rights of female victims of violence in Pakistan, where honor killings were not unheard of and happened much too frequently. So, in conclusion, I introduce you to Rifat Hassan. Sometimes we think that the most powerful people in the world are autocrats or oligarchs or technocrats. But I think that teachers are the most important people in the world because they dispel ignorance and they empower us, you and me. Thank you.
Let's have a hand for Madelyn.
All right, great. Wait, is this microphone on? Is it? Okay, perfect. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Today I'm just going to be discussing what I find to be a very important chapter in Islamic history and its current relationships with the West, this being in the form of French Algeria, in which case, okay. Okay. Okay, this better? Yeah. Okay, awesome, thank you. In that case, my name is Madelyn, and today I'm going to just be discussing what I find to be a very important chapter in Islamic history, particularly in regards of its relationship with the West. And with this, that is in the context of colonial Algeria, particularly under the rule of France. And with this, there'll be a special emphasis on the ways in which this colonial dynamic has continued to shape different components and aspects of Algerian nationalism and senses of Muslim identity, not only within Algeria itself, but also within metropolitan France. So that just brings us to just a quick roadmap of this presentation, where first it's just going to be a quick overround about the colonial background of colonial Algeria, which will then inform us on how exactly Islam and Algerian nationalism really came to elucidate within each other, and then eventually resulted in the Algerian independence movement, in which case we can address the lasting impacts that we still see today. So with this, France's invasion of Algeria was truly the first major colonization of an Arab nation ever since the Crusades, and it truly continues to define Arab-European relations for centuries to come. And the arrival of French colonization in Algeria really commenced in 1830 with the invasion of coastal Algiers. And while this was a seemingly easy victory for the French forces, the empire truly continued to struggle with subduing the Algerian forces, and this was evidenced by the 18 years of resistance that we saw, which is why it took until 1848 for France in order to successfully actually conquer Algeria wholly. But with this, once it was conquered successfully by once France successfully conquered Algeria, we reached a point where Algeria was actually considered a part of integral France, which is a very unique and distinct distinction, as unlike other colonies, Algeria was actually considered a part of a metropolitan region. And with this was divided into 3 departments where it truly became a very central component of both domestic and foreign policy alike. As Algeria was valued not only for its agricultural production and capabilities, but also for its position as a gateway to equatorial Africa. And so with this, now as a recognized jurisdiction of France, Algeria became known as a destination for hundreds of thousands of European immigrants scattered across southern Europe primarily. And with this, these European settlers, they were known as colons, and they would form their own very distinct social class as well, as this colon population was afforded greater political rights and privileges than those of the native Algerian populations, who were largely excluded from political participation and enfranchisement. And so with this, the arrival of the colons was a part of a greater objective to truly Frenchify Algeria in a sense by reshaping the very ethnography of Algeria itself. This was part of the larger civilizing mission, which promoted not only French cultural supremacy, but also included the destruction of Islamic institutions and those of Quranic schools. This civilizing mission was further carried out by the arrival of Catholic missionaries from southern Europe who attempted to convert the Algerian population, but some of the most greatest indicators of the civilizing mission was actually enshrined within the bureaucracy itself. For instance, there's a statute passed in 1865 that offered citizenship to Algerians who converted from Islam and rejected their Muslim identity. However, despite living within integral France, Algerian Muslims were considered nationals but never quite citizens. This statute codified the legal differences between Algeria's religious and ethnic communities. And while the Statute of 1865 was an attempt to assimilate the Algerian population into French culture, this largely failed to convert Algerian Muslims and instead contributed to the ongoing legacy and the development of a distinct Algerian Muslim identity. These consequences led to the development of a succinct form of Islamic nationalism within Algeria, and that largely stemmed from these pointed attacks on Islamic and Arabic culture. And particularly as we entered World War I and the Islamic reform movement truly took off, this really shaped the development of nationalism even further. When it comes to Algerian nationalism, while there's plenty of nuances and different understandings, it can be broadly understood with 3 main factions. The first of that being among the assimilationists, who primarily pursued gradual and reformist tactics for the pursuit of full political and civic equality within France. Those who patroned assimilation were largely consisted of the elite Algerians who were educated under the French education system and therefore took with them a lot of the French cultural and educational values and believed that these values would be best instilled within Algeria under the full equality of France. However, the events of World War I made it increasingly clear that this wasn't truly going to be the case for assimilationists, particularly among the Algerian soldiers, of which there's about 170,000 who fought alongside their fellow Frenchmen. And despite the fact that these Algerians not only served but also died along with fellow Frenchmen, but were never guaranteed the same rights to citizenship that the other French people were, this pretty quickly eroded away a lot of the hopes for assimilation for those who fell within this camp. However, on the other hand, there was also the Algerian ulama, which presented an opposition to colonization that was strictly rooted within Islamic tradition. The ulama of Algeria was very heavily influenced by the Islamic Reformation of the 19th and 20th century, and thus stressed the importance of Arabic education and promoted a very distinct cultural identity that was rooted in Islamic and Arabic tradition. And alternatively, the nationalism of the radical proletariat was more so developed within the working classes of Algeria and North Africa. During the First World War, Algerian workers were recruited in order to labor in factories across France, where they not only grew accustomed to higher wages, but now bore firsthand witness to the ways in which the principles of equality, liberty, and fraternity were applied within metropolitan France, but not within the departments of Algeria itself. And from this movement, the workers created what was known to be the Star of North Africa, or its French acronym being the ENA. And this was the first truly nationalist party that made explicit nationalist demands, and it was originated as a solidarity group among North African workers who first, again, meant to generally advance the rights of those in the Maghreb, but eventually came to focus primarily on the Algerian issue and the pursuit of Algerian independence. And these calls for independence were not simply rooted within the Algerian political context, but were very much shaped by their experiences in the French social, economic, and political arenas. These understandings of Algerian independence would continue to evolve throughout the nation's bid for independence, until it was eventually granted in 1962. And as previously mentioned, the tensions of the First World War certainly contribute to understandings of independence and nationalism, particularly in 1940, where France's collapse to German invasion truly delegitimized France's colonial rule and really brought to question the legitimacy and the power of French imperial forces. And so with this, these tensions continued to mount until 1945, where mounting unrest led to fatal clashes between Algerians and the European settler population. And in response, French forces mobilized along the European settlers and launched a massacre against the Algerian people that killed tens of thousands of Algerians, and then also marked a turning point in Franco-Algerian relations. In 1947, an attempt to stem this growing tide of nationalism, France enacted a statute that designated Algeria an autonomous region of France and granted broad citizenship and enfranchisement to Muslims for the first time. However, as part of this newfound representation, an Algerian assembly was created wherein two chambers were formed, with one representing the native Algerians and the other representing the European settlers. However, within this newfound form of representation, there's very much a sense of false parity, as in this situation, both chambers were given the same amount of representatives and representation, despite the fact that the European settlers were an overwhelming minority within this population. And so therefore, between this and a few other different factors, a sense of goodwill and the ability to come to terms and agreements with France through reform for the sake of Algerian Muslims really started to fall through, which is why in 1954, tensions would truly erupt as the National Liberation Front was formed and launched its first guerrilla attack on November 1st, attacking both military and civilian targets. And from Cairo, the National Liberation Front broadcasted a declaration calling on Muslims in Algeria to join the national struggle and the, quote, restoration of the Algerian state, sovereign, social, and democratic, within the framework of the principles of Islam. And therefore, in 1961, after a sustained bloody conflict that was truly defined by plenty of guerrilla warfare and war crimes committed on both sides, the president of France at the time, Charles de Gaulle, truly had no other choice but to host a referendum on the issue of Algerian independence, in which case there was an overwhelming majority vote in favor of Algerian independence, not only within Algeria itself, but the metropolitan France as well. So therefore, in 1962, Charles de Gaulle, he would declare Algerian independent state, which would kind of trigger this next phase of Islamic identity. So although Algeria has remained independent from France throughout the last 60 or so years, the legacies of this colonial chapter are very much still felt today. This is very much evidenced by ongoing discourse within France itself, where the issue is very much presented as tensions between a secular republic pitted against an Algerian Islam. And this perceived ideological difference can largely be traced back to Islam's tool used as a tool of Algerian independence, where it represented a rejection of French society and values, which fuels ongoing debates surrounding immigration and the assimilation of France's immigrant populations, especially pertaining to the 1.6 million people of Algerian descent who currently live in France today. And in government discourse truly across the French political spectrum, French and Muslim identities are often treated as mutually exclusive, despite their very much entangled sense of history. Whereas in Algeria, this history is more so reflected in the fact that anti-colonialism has truly been a core value throughout much of Algeria's political and social discourse, which has been evidenced in later Islamist movements and strategies, and will later become even more so evident in Algeria's civil war. But however, Algeria's identity continues to be enshrined in at least some part by the religious background and history stemming from the singularized treatment that emerged from France's colonial history. However, dynamics continue to shape and evolve as new identities and relationships have emerged, particularly among the children of Algerian immigrants in France who strive to reconcile their faith with their nationality. This fact, among those I just mentioned, demonstrates that for better or worse, France's and Algeria's shared history continues to shape ongoing dynamics between Islam and the West. Thank you.
Let's have a hand for Tyler.
Curveball on y'all. We're going back to the ancient world. So, my name is Tyler Worm. I'm a Central and Southwest Asian Studies student. I'm also currently working on my master's in interdisciplinary studies. And this is a little bit of my thesis that I am currently working on for my paper. Today I'm going to talk about the parallels of the Parthian and Han dynasties basically, I'm giving you a brief 480-year overview of these two empires in a nutshell. We're going to talk about the historical background of Parthian and Han dynasties, the political structures, governments, economic systems and trade routes, military strategies, cultural and technological achievements. So, the historical background. The establishment of the empire, the Parthian Empire was established around 247 BC, lasted until 224 AD. The empire came to an end when the Sasanian Empire defeated them and took over as the next established domain. It was founded by Arsaces, and he officially assumed power in 238. They are an Iranic, Central Asian people. It's a very diverse culture, blending various traditions and influences within its vast territories. There's a lot of Hellenistic traits that were carried over from the time Alexander the Great was there. They had frequent conflicts with its neighboring powers, particularly Rome, and it defined the military history of the Parthian Empire. And that is the general location of where the Parthian Empire was located. So it covered Central Asia over to modern-day Turkey. So from modern-day Afghanistan to modern-day Turkey. The establishment of the Han Dynasty was founded in 206, lasted until 220 by Emperor Gaozu, and greatly thrived under Emperor Han Wudi. It was considered the golden age of China, and it solidified the foundation of imperial China. Advancements in art. The dynasty is renowned for its significant contributions to art, including poetry, sculptures, and ceramics that influenced future generations. Scientific innovations during the Han Dynasty. New sciences were founded and technologies were created. This included medicine, astronomy, engineering. Silk Road trade routes. The Han Dynasty established Silk Road, facilitating trade and cultural exchange between China and other civilizations across Asia and beyond. Next, we're going to go into the geopolitical context. Both empires existed during overlapping periods, had significant geopolitical influences. Parthians controlled key trade routes between the East and the West, while the Han Dynasty expanded its territory and influence throughout East Asia. Essentially, this was important because it allowed the two empires to merge and create basically become allies. It also allowed the spread of different cultures and ideologies as well. Let's see. We're going to go into political structure. Parthian political organization ruling. Parthian Empire operated under a feudal system that empowered local rulers with significant autonomy over the territories. Basically, each satrapy was ruled by a governor and only was called upon for a national or for basically any major event, natural disaster, war. Then the emperor or then the king would call on the governors to assemble to bring the military might. It was also a decentralized governance. Influence of the ruling elite led to the decentralized political structure, allowing regional leaders to play crucial roles in governing. They were able to govern at their own will. They were also key figures in maintaining stability and governance across the various regions. The Han dynasties was a bureaucratic system. It was a centralized system that was highly organized and efficient, allowing for effective governance. It had merit-based selections, which in the Han dynasty, they were chosen based on merit through rigorous examinations, enhancing quality of governments. So they were tested in order to become basically a politician. Administrative efficiency. Structure of the bureaucratic system contributed significantly to the efficiency and stability within the empire. Comparative governance and efficiency. Decentralized governance. The Parthian Empire exemplified decentralized governance with the local rulers, holding significant power and autonomy within their regions. The centralized bureaucracy facilitated uniform governance and allowed for efficient administration across the entire empire. The comparative analysis of it is the government styles reveals the strengths and weaknesses of decentralized versus centralized system in managing empires. Next, we're going to economic systems and trade routes. The Parthian economy and trade practices, strategic trade location, because this empire was centrally located, it was a prime target for trade along the Silk Road, which allowed the Parthian Empire to thrive economically. They traded various goods, which included silk, spices like saffron, which is a highly sought after spice in that region and very expensive. They also had precious metals in silver and bronze. And they also had various gemstones. Examples are lapis lazuli and turquoise, which are the more expensive of the two in this time frame. Because of this impact that it had on the economy for the market, it led them to becoming the wealthiest empires during the time. Han Dynasty's economic strategies. State monopolies. The dynasty established monopolies on essential goods to control prices, stabilize the economy, ensuring resources were distributed effectively. Investments in infrastructure such as the roads, canals, facilitated trade and communication, promoting agricultural and industrial growth across the empire. Agricultural growth increased productivity, enabling the Han Dynasty to support growing population and economy. And the industrial growth was stimulated by state policies that encouraged production of trade of various goods. One of those would be jade. Trade facilitation along the Silk Road, the impacts that it had. It was a crucial role in facilitating trade between Parthian and Han empires, allowing for exchange of valuable goods. Cultural exchange. The Silk Road enabled rich cultural exchange between diverse civilizations, influencing art, philosophy, and technology. One of these would be religion. Buddhism was spread throughout the Silk Road, and it made its way from India into China. Flow of ideas and technologies. The connections formed by the Silk Road allowed for new ideas, technology shaping development of both empires. So each empire thrived off of each other. Military strategies and conflicts. Parthian military tactics and key conflicts. So Parthians relied heavily in cavalry tactics. They had a massive cavalry unit. Basically, these were archers on horseback that were very agile and very deadly in the battlefield. They also employed hit-and-run tactics to outmaneuver large enemy forces, allowing them to strike swiftly and retreat effectively. So one of the things that they created was called the Parthian shot. And the Parthian shot is where when they are in retreat, the archers would face the opposite direction and fire a volley of arrows into the enemy. And as that volley was going towards them, they would turn back around and charge into attack. Key conflicts with Rome. They engaged in significant battles against Rome, demonstrating their military prowess and strategies that challenged Roman forces. The major battle for them was at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, where they defeated Crassus. Han Dynasty's campaigns, and they undertook significant amount of military campaigns in Xiongnu tribes to expand its territorial influence and secure trade routes. The Han Dynasty's military was known for its well-organized structures, allowing for effective command and control in various campaigns. The Han military employed innovative tactics and strategies that enhanced their effectiveness in combat and contributed to their victories. The Han Dynasty was very infantry-based versus the Parthian, where they were more cavalry-based. Parthian military strategy, like I said before, they utilized mobility as cavalry as their primary military force, allowing for swift maneuver and tactical advantage. The Han Dynasty typically focused on infantry and fortifications, which allowed them to develop strong defensive structures that allowed them to withstand invasions. Impact on success for both. The differing military strategy of the Parthians and Han greatly influenced their military successes and territorial control throughout history. Cultural and technological achievements. A Parthian cultural aspect, art and architecture featured a unique blend of styles from various cultures, showcasing their rich and cultural influences. Again, there's a lot of Hellenistic, what's the word I'm looking for? Elements in their designs. Metallurgy innovations. They made significant advancements which contributed to their military and economic strengths. Trade practices established by the Parthians facilitated commerce along the Silk Road, enhancing cultural exchange. Again, like with religion, the spread of Buddhism. Han Dynasty's cultural and technological advancements. They're renowned for significant technological advancements such as papermaking and the invention of the seismograph. Culturally, they produced important literary works and philosophical thoughts that influenced future generations. Cross-cultural influences and legacies. Both empires left enduring legacies, influencing neighboring cultures and shaping historical narratives. Their interactions along trade routes fostered cross-cultural exchanges that enriched both societies. And in conclusion, the Parthian Empire and Han Dynasty, while distinct, shared remarkable similarities in governance, economy, military strategies, and cultural achievements. Their legacies continue to impact the understanding of ancient civilization.
Welcome, Aaron.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aaron Edens. I am a CSWA and history student here at the University of Montana. Kind of this jumping back and forth kind of leads one presentation into the other. So Tyler spoke about the old Silk Road. I will be kind of moving into that with the new Silk Road and the opium industry in Afghanistan. So kind of a general overview of what we're looking at. We're going to be looking at who lives there, the when, where, and why the industry began, how opium boomed into the industry that it was to fuel a war, and then be transitioning to the U.S. occupation and the production of opium, then the return of the Taliban, and then kind of to conclude with notes on the return of the Taliban, and then China's role involved with the return and the economy that they have now. So one of the biggest things about this country that a lot of people don't realize is the ethnic diversity of the country makes it incredibly hard to govern and to kind of productively keep an active working nation state. And the society is not class-based, it is ethnic-based. So looking at this map here of Afghanistan, we can see that the Pashtuns make up the majority. This is still kind of a thing today. Whereas when it comes to the opium production, it is predominantly the Tajiks and the Hazaras who make up the agricultural and merchant classes in Afghanistan. Opium is extracted from poppies, and there's several different types of poppies. The one that we are most commonly familiar with is the red poppy that you will often see handed out outside the grocery store around Veterans Day, Armistice Day, in November 11th. But when the poppy is prepared to be extracted, the inner wax of these bulbs, as you can see here, is where the wax is collected. It is then dried and then transported and then used in the many different forms, such as in pill form, and then most commonly black tar heroin or morphine. So where the industry began, it's not quite sure of an exact date, but as it became a more productive industry happened in 1955, when Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi issued an opium ban on all production in Iran. And then it kind of, under the reign of Muhammad Zahir in the bottom right, the industry then became pretty small and was not illicit. It was more kind of properly ran, and then just kind of steadily grew as the decades progressed. How the opium funded the Afghan Civil War. So as kind of a transition from the fall of the monarchy in 1973 into the when the Shah was overthrown in April of 1973, the rise of the Republic as he was overthrown by his cousin, Daoud Khan, who was later overthrown in 1978 by a Marxist regime. And then as they were not able to control the Marxist regime of Afghanistan, the Soviets came in 1979 to kind of govern things and eventually started a war. And the production of opium kind of increased slightly. It did not really become a big industry until after the Soviet-Afghan War, when the first Afghan Civil War started in 1989, shortly after the Soviets left. As we could see from this map here, which shows the kind of areas of the second Afghan Civil War, which started in 1992. We could see in the first one in 92 all of these different areas that were controlled by the different chiefs and or kind of warlords of the areas. And then kind of as it progressed, we could see that the Taliban eventually, when they came to promise in 1993, and then kind of continued their progression through the country, and can kind of see how they came into power and control. The opium was produced and sold to fund arms, medicine, that sort of thing. In 2001, the Taliban, to get on the good side of the United Nations, issued a opium ban, which saw the industry completely dive off. And then later that year, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan, and the industry started back up again. At its peak, it was a $200 million a year industry, estimated, primarily of that of black tar heroin. The largest producer was the Helmand province, which saw 129,000 hectares in 2022, which is roughly 319,000 acres. As the U.S. and NATO's occupation was there, many military operations were underway, such as the Iron Tempest, which was a series of precision bomb raids on opium dens and heroin factories throughout the country. While the U.S. and NATO were there, they really pushed for the Afghans to change the cash crops they were using, what they were producing. So some of the options were potatoes, wheat, and in some areas, saffron. One of the main reasons for this is for how profitable opium was, the poppy production, trying to transition to saffron, which would fill that financial gap because of how expensive that spice is to produce. This picture here, provided by the BBC, shows the specific type of poppy that grows there. And it's very tall, and you can see the large bulbs that are growing where the flowers are at. Here's a graph by the BBC as well that shows kind of this steady up and down throughout the 90s of the opium production, the dive bomb in 2001, and then just kind of this up and down constant climb throughout the U.S. and NATO's occupation in Afghanistan. In August of 2021, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then later, shortly following, NATO leaving as well, and Taliban were able to recover the country and come back into power. This saw the opium industry absolutely skyrocket, and 80 to 90% estimated of the world's opium was coming from Afghanistan at that time. And a majority of it was illicit. Factories and industries started back up and becoming more rampant, and were able to produce not only heroin, but also to start using opium in pill form in production. In this picture here, you can see the wax that is being extracted from the bulbs of the poppies. The Taliban, in April of 2022, issued another ban, like they did in 2001, but not to completely get rid of the industry as a whole, but more or less to centralize it and make it more legal, to appeal to the UN and the surrounding countries for financial and economic assistance. This ban will ultimately force people to cut back on the amount of opium that was produced. In the terms of Helmand Province, 129,000 hectares would transition to being 740 hectares in 2023. And why to cut back on the opium? It's it doesn't look good. Kind of scuffs your image, whatever. And so you kind of want to have a better image to receive this more financial militant aid and to try to appear to be less of a force. One of the main reasons why they're cutting back on this, how they are cutting back on this is by having special detachments and units, as we can see in the bottom image here, of Taliban fighters who are going field to field, breaking the bulbs of all kind of the plantations and everything, and then the burning in the top right of a lot of the dried opium and then a lot of the other stuff needed to produce it. Some foreign influences, to look at three primarily: China, Pakistan, and Iran. So China has become the biggest economic friend of Afghanistan after the U.S. have left, and which is kind of interesting for a variety of reasons. And the three I kind of focus on the most is their current situation in Xinjiang, which is the tan kind of image there showing the Xinjiang province. They are currently suffering from a Islamic terror, and by having this economic alliance with Afghanistan, they can prevent the Wahhabist extremist views that the Taliban have by slowly reaching its way into Xinjiang and causing an already volatile situation to become even worse. Another reason is China's large population. By letting the opium get into their communities and everything could harm the population. And so by having this close eye on Afghanistan, they can force this regulation and prevent it from getting into China's borders as effectively. In the terms of Pakistan, Pakistan benefits from this, as a lot of it, a good portion of it, comes through their borders and into the Indian Ocean and then distributed from there. Pakistan also trains the Taliban as well. And so having this military benefit, if Pakistan were ever to go to war with India, they can fall back into Afghanistan and have the Taliban's aid to sort of hold the Indians back. In the terms of Iran, a completely different relationship, and it's not a good one. So Iran also has a illicit narcotics trade going on. And so a lot of militant clashes happen between Iranian forces and Taliban fighters. So some concluding remarks. In my opinion, looking at kind of the progression of the Taliban and where they're going, even though they are decreasing the amount of opium that's being produced and distributed, they will still continue to do this industry, as it is very profitable, and it would be too difficult to start up some of their other industries, such as their precious gem industry, which is very minimal. China's kind of tapping into that right now, and the kind of mountains of the northwestern part of Afghanistan have some of the largest deposits of lapis lazuli, which I pronounced incorrectly. And so just kind of these untapped industries, for the Taliban, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to completely abandon this, but to kind of shape it so it benefits them in the long run a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for 4 excellent presentations. Now we have a little bit of time for a couple of questions. Anyone? There's a microphone there if you'd like to reach the microphone in the middle.
All right. I was wondering if you know what's behind the ideological shift in the Taliban, prohibiting opium during their first rule, and now they seem to be allowing it.
Let's see, is this on? Yeah. It's kind of, I wouldn't say much of a shift. I would say it would be kind of this realization that now that the world is, we have social media and we have the media everywhere, it's kind of just this look that if the Taliban want to make their country work, they're going to have to bend before they break, essentially. And so, though the old Taliban, being far more authoritarian than they are now, did see that by getting rid of this industry, or at least decreasing it, it would make them look better and by the world and everything. And it's kind of the same mentality, I believe, that the new Taliban is having. Yeah.
You cut down the production, the price goes up. That's
Well, and
another
something to add on that too is in order for them to become, basically they need to get out of the illegal business and try to legitimize themselves. So get away from selling drug money to fund their government and military, and find a way to actually legalize something to fund them legitimately.
Yeah, question to Aaron. I was wondering, we hear a lot about the rare earth minerals in Ukraine and the role they might play in peace agreement. Are there rare earth minerals in Afghanistan? I recall hearing something about that, but I'm not sure. So I thought I'd ask you.
Yeah, you're a little more familiar with it than I am.
So I'll take that with. So in Afghanistan, they have a lot of different minerals. They have a lot of the same minerals that Ukraine has, which is the reason why China's over there. So everything that you get out of the ground over there is what you find in your cell phones, plus the abundance of rubies, sapphires, lapis lazulis, turquoise. They're all, and they have so Afghanistan has one of the largest lapis lazuli mines in the northern region, where some of the most beautiful pieces come out of. What is it? I think palladium is just one of the metals that is used in your cell phones, laptops, smartwatches. That all comes out of there, and so China is working with the Taliban in order to corner that market, so China can reap the benefits while allowing the Taliban to conduct their projects with China's funding. So, does that answer your question? All right.
Hello, sorry. In regards to Muslim identity in France, are those Algerians in France sympathizing right now with like those newer Muslims that are, I know there's a lot of protests right now, especially in France and Europe, anti-Muslim protesting. Do you see that the Algerian population in France is sympathizing or trying to support that population?
I'm sorry, if you could just clarify which population of Muslims are you referring to?
The French Algerians, anyone that's identifying as Muslim Algerian within the French country.
Okay. So I guess, sorry, I'm just asking one last clarifying question. So who are you asking if the Algerians, like who are you asking if they sympathize with? Like what protests?
Oh, I think never mind. I don't like. I think my question's too weird. Sorry. I can ask a different question.
Maggie, you're good. No, you're not making it weird.
Thanks, AM.
But what Algerians? So you're talking about the Algerians in France
Yes.
and asking if they're in support of,
Well, like, I guess, yeah, just sort of like,
are the Algerians in France having problems?
from the, I guess, the past history, just sort of like supporting the people that are new that are also having like an identity crisis or having difficulty coming into the country.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. Definitely, like, the immigration debate is certainly very relevant in France. Especially very recently, pretty much whenever France passes a new immigration law, especially Macron has taken on like recently more like right-wing government, which has really been criticized, and with that adapted some stricter immigration policies. Specifically in regards like to Algeria, where they've been limiting Algerian visas. So they've definitely seen some backlash in regards to that, but a lot of that does come from a very sincere attempt by Algerian Muslims, like within France, to want to assimilate within French culture and enjoy the benefits of that. But unfortunately, a lot of like the way like the ideological debate is phrased is that again, to be seen as French and to be seen as Muslim are still viewed as unfortunately mutually exclusive, which is something and is like a kind of a current discussion that a lot of Algerian Muslims are a part of now and kind of trying to face and conquer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, participants and also presenters for this wonderful session we had. The next section of the of this 22nd annual conference of Central Southwest Asia will confronting President Trump from Russia and Ukraine to Israel and Iran. That's going to be another interesting session that will invite you to join in. And so thanks again, and great job.